Good name.
Welcome to the Liberal Buzz Show. I'm Denise Dory, your host, and my guest today is a community activist that I admire very much from the mental health and services.
World, yes. Yes, David Elliot Lewis.
And we're here to talk about conservatorship, which was Senate Bill 1045. As you know, it was wasn't it rejected in Los Angeles and San Diego?
Yes.
But
But not here. It's an odd piece of legislation, and it's one of two things I hope we can talk about tonight. This and the coming mental health San Francisco legislation that Matt Haney and Hillary Ronen are trying to put forward. It looks like that'll be on the March 2020 ballot. We have an election March 2020 that it'll be
Yes.
on. So, but first, conservatorship. It's a weird thing in that it's based on a state law that yet our Mayor London Breed, authored with State Senator Scott Wiener. Now, for a mayor to work with a state senator for state legislation that only one county in the entire state is interested in, it's really bizarre. It's basically a city law that has some state backing that. And they threw in L.A. County and San Diego County, so it would make it look like it wasn't just San Francisco only. Even though L.A. is doing their own thing, they're not interested in being told by Scott Wiener what to do. And San Diego doesn't want to be told what to do by the state, so they're doing their own thing. It was basically London Breed and Scott Wiener deciding to deal with all these problematic people on the street, people that are often sometimes in mental health crisis, often drug users, and basically this show is called Liberal Buzz, and it's about drug culture in part.
Partly,
And
yeah.
yet, what this law is about is taking people who use drugs and trying to sweep them off the street because they make rich people uncomfortable. And I'm just speaking truth to power.
It's true.
That's what this is about.
It is.
This is about taking drug users and trying to clear our streets from them.
Yes.
And that you can't, that never works.
It's an ugly law.
It never works.
Would you call drug use and coming under the category of an ugly law?
And we should explain what that ugly law means for your viewers. Ugly laws actually happened over 100 years ago in
Yes.
San Francisco. We were one of the first cities to do it,
Yes.
where we literally made it a crime to appear in public with a physical disability. If you were disabled, missing a limb, deformed, had some visual, physical disability, it was a crime to appear in public. You could be cited
Or
for
lying, what about lying on the sidewalk?
that goes without question.
Yeah.
That would have been prosecuted. But just appearing in a way that made others uncomfortable was enough to create an arrest. That's pretty disgusting. And yet this city in the 1800s did that. They passed these ugly laws. And in a way, this conservatorship expansion, that's what we call it, an expansion of conservatorship laws. And we should explain that the city already has conservatorship laws. It's based on a state law called LPS for people who are truly disabled, who can't help themselves. Over 500 people in San Francisco are already conserved. We don't need more laws to try to target just drug users that make other people uncomfortable. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have drug services or treatment on demand.
Is this about neighborhood groups?
In large part, sadly, that's not only, but yes.
Neighborhood groups disapproving of folks out there on the sidewalk shooting drugs.
This is also about often calls that the mayor's office and the city supervisors get from their own constituents, calls or complaint about why is this person shooting up on my street, or why is this homeless encampment on my street and blocking my doorway. And so, yes, it's about the calls of complaint that our city leaders get. That's what's in part. And when our mayor ran for re-election the last time. She's, of course, running again. But when she ran the last time, one of her big mental health promises was to pass conservatorship legislation. It was one of her when it came to mental health, she didn't talk about adding more services. She talked about adding more conservatorship, which, So I'm part of a group called Voluntary Services First Coalition. You can Google it, Voluntary Services First Coalition.
So you think that what's driving this is a bunch of uninformed people that really don't understand our issues? Do you suppose?
I think in part, but I think it's also it's not that they're so uninformed. It's that they're impatient with seeing people who don't match their lifestyle on the street, often unhoused, not always, but often homeless, and sometimes, yes, using drugs openly on the street, which is still a crime. And we don't need new laws to prosecute people who inject drugs on the street. We already have laws for that. Now we already do. Why do we need to add more laws for this? For something we already have. What we don't have is drug treatment on demand for people who want to get better. We have drug treatment after wait lists. We have drug treatment when a slot opens. We have case management after 9 months. We have psychotherapy after 3 months. But we don't have treatment on demand, not yet. We don't have a place people can walk into and get help when they need it.
Oh, no drop-in center.
No, we don't. And so the second thing I want to talk about tonight is good news, which is Mental Health San Francisco, that supervisor from District 9, Hillary Ronan, and supervisor from District 6, Matt Haney, have come up with, which is a way to kind of fix all these broken cracks in our system, which is drug treatment on demand, a 724 walk-in center that you can drop in without an appointment and get immediate help. And it's for people who either don't have like mental health insurance or do, but it doesn't cover it. Like people have Kaiser insurance often when they need behavioral health treatment or help with in mental health areas. They have to wait months. If you're Kaiser, you have to wait months sometimes for help. And so this would help all those people. If you're a resident of the city and your current health plan doesn't cover you, Mental Health San Francisco, which is basically universal health care for the mind, would cover you. The city already has Healthy San Francisco, which is basically single-payer universal health care. We already have that, but this extends Healthy San Francisco to the world of both substance abuse treatment for people who want it, doesn't force anything on anybody, and mental health treatment for people who need it or want it, which we don't exactly have. We have a system right now which is called high barrier, high threshold, meaning if you really want an appointment and you're willing to keep going back and take an appointment weeks or months out, you'll get one eventually. But if you're in crisis, that doesn't help you. That doesn't help anyone to have to wait when they're... And someone, as you know, let's say they have a severe substance use addiction. I'm not talking about smoking weed. I'm talking about heroin and methamphetamine or cocaine. Yeah. Serious substance use issue, and they really want to get treatment. Sometimes that openness to treatment is a temporary thing. And when you're willing to kind of get help, there should be help available. You shouldn't be told to come back or get on a wait list. That doesn't work.
Or have the police come and arrest you for something you're trying to abate.
Exactly. So these two things, this expansion of conservatorship with SB 1045 is like one way to try to solve the problem, but a much better way is treatment on demand, services on demand, therapy on demand, counselors on demand, walk-in help on demand.
So with this conservatorship, is there a way to track who's been conserved for how long? And, are there statistics that we can follow up and perhaps know if our tax dollars are being wasted on this?
So one of the features of this law that was put in as an amendment by community request to try to soften the blow was to make sure there is that tracking that you just said, because yes, the community needs to be able to follow up on who this is affecting, who this is happening to, what's happening with them. Are they being placed out of county? Which another big worry is that because there's not enough treatment beds in the city, that people could be shipped all throughout the state against their will for treatment against their will. Now think, if you are not homeless but you are housed and you are shipped against your will out of city, out of county to some hospital for an undetermined amount, what happens to your housing? You lose your housing, you lose your possessions, you end up traumatizing the person, and what you do is you make that person so traumatized by the system they will never seek help again. They will never approach a doctor again unless they absolutely have to, because they're going to associate medicine and mental health help with abuse. And it's called provider-caused trauma. And one of the reasons people don't seek help is they've had really negative experiences with some providers who are judgmental because they're drug users, They practice kind of attitude against them because they don't like the lifestyle they live. And you've seen this. I've seen this.
In my case, I had a bacterial illness that caused depression for 49 years till I actually got treated with antibiotics, and it cured it after 49 years. It was called mycoplasma, which is there's a lot of bacterial illnesses that cause behavioral difficulties and
And you think
and cognitive difficulties, and the medical
Wow.
system doesn't test for any of them except UTIs. I'm serious.
So
I've been through the system. I can tell you.
you think that treatment was delayed for you because of prejudice and assumptions about you?
No, I think because they just don't test for it. They don't test for anything. It doesn't matter who you are. They didn't have anything to judge me for. I'd go in there, hey, I've got pneumonia for the third time this year. Oh, well,
Interesting.
sorry about your damn luck. Yeah, they don't test for bacterial illnesses. And I got diagnosed with depression right after the surgery that I got for tonsillectomy where I caught it's called mycoplasma. I caught it during surgery.
Shit.
And a bunch of other kids caught the same thing, and the doctor can't practice medicine anymore. Yeah, I'm going public with this. Yeah, that happened at Eden Hospital in Castro Valley 50 years ago, July 5th at 3:30 p.m.
And you suffered for 5 decades.
5 decades. And where I couldn't breathe. I was depressed all the time. I went from being a gifted student, gifted in every way. I was the best in my class. I could memorize. I still could memorize stuff, but I couldn't relate to people, or I couldn't form friendship. It was hard to form friendships. It was hard to navigate the world, really, even pay my bills. But I started eating a bunch of health foods and joined a gym and just did the best I could to clear my lungs all the time. Cannabis helped clear my lungs by helping me cough up all that phlegm, and stop the depression too.
So how did you finally get it figured out?
I
or
caught
treated?
Lyme disease, and the antibiotics for Lyme disease got rid of the
Interesting.
mycoplasma. And
Interesting.
Lyme disease has its own problems, but nothing. I caught it in time, but it's nothing like that.
But they cured you of that.
Yes, and
Thank
it's
God.
wonderful. Yeah, I'm really happy to be over it. So if the lesson here to learn is the doctors are not. You can go to all the best hospitals in the city, and they might not test you for what's really wrong. They'll say, "Oh, you have fibromyalgia." No, it's Lyme disease. Oh, I have a heart condition. No, it's Lyme disease because the bacteria eats the heart. They
Damn.
could have killed me in the middle of the night, and
Yes,
they
it
would
could
never have known because they eat. That's the first thing they eat is a heart muscle because it's yummy to them.
Oh my God.
You know.
Oh, this is scary.
Yes, it
This
is.
is
And
scary
don't
stuff.
stay out of the woods. I'm serious.
I've had many fine walks in the woods. So
Yes, but check yourself because they can be the size of a poppy seed.
wear long pants in the woods.
And
but
the
not
homeless
shorts.
people live in the parks, and that's where they are too.
Good
And
point. It's a
they
good-
found out of all the parks in San Francisco, only 2 parks didn't have ticks.
Oh, my
I got
God.
a call from the health department on April 17th saying, "Hey, we're worried because your titers were high for this malarial illness. That it's a protozoa that comes in the tick with the Lyme. I have 2. I have a protozoa and Lyme, so and that's what stops the heart." So they said, "Oh well, you're gonna be really sick real soon, And I said, I thought they called because they cared about me. They called because they just wanted to know where I got bitten. That's all. That's all they wanted to know.
Good
So
to-
they don't care about you if you get bitten by a
You
tick.
raise a good point about homelessness and the health hazards of being
Yeah.
homeless. If you were homeless, you already lose about 25 years off your life. If you have a severe mental illness, you lose 25 years off your life. If you're homeless and mentally ill, it's even worse. And it's tragic. So the cost of not housing people, the cost of not treating people,
Yeah.
it's severe. You lose a third of your life or more.
Oh, that's so sad. Yeah, you're right.
It
You're
is.
not wrong.
So I'm hoping the city will pass Mental Health San Francisco in March
Yeah.
2020.
They're going to vote on it.
Yes, there'll be two ballot measures. One will be Mental Health San Francisco. One will be a companion tax measure for the
Really?
rich. It's called excessive CEO income tax.
Oh, yes. Prop C.
No, it's not Prop C. That's already passed. This is for people who earn more than 100 times their average employee of their company. So if your salary is more than 100 times the average salary in your company, you get taxed a very tiny percentage, like less than 1%.
Yeah.
If you look at the amount of money people got from the Trump tax break, I hate to say that name, President 45 tax break, they'd be giving back just a tiny percentage of that to help fund Mental Health San Francisco. Now here's the good news is that this tax thing would fund it. The bad news is because it's a tax thing, it has to pass by 2/3. So 50 plus 1 is not enough.
That's hard.
That's hard for a tax measure.
That's really hard. It's like
I know. It's
60 something.
So like Prop C passed by 60%, but not 2/3. That's why it was being litigated. Mental Health San Francisco only needs to pass by 50%. 50% plus 1.
Okay.
Plus 1 vote more.
All right.
So if it does pass without the tax measure, they will find other ways to fund it, but it'd be better to fund it with this tax measure.
Yeah, of course.
So here's the thing with conservatorships. Just getting back to that, since you started by asking me about that. So this is moving forward with our Board of Supervisors, and it looks like because it's more politically costly to oppose it, most of the supervisors are going to support it. Now that's the bad news. Here's the good news: is this is going to affect hardly anybody. The people who even qualify for this, for SB 1045. I don't know if you can see it here, are people who've had 8 5150 psychiatric detentions in 12 months, and people who have a dual diagnosis of both mental illness and substance use disorder. That's what it's called. Substance use disorder plus dual diagnosis. In other words, you can't just suspect somebody's a user. You have to have a diagnosis. So unless you have a diagnosis of dual diagnosis and the 8 5150s, it doesn't count. And you know how many people in the city even meet that criteria? Like less than a dozen. So the truth be told, in some ways, SB 1045 conservatorship expansion, it's a scary, terrible thing.
Yeah.
But yet it'll affect less than a dozen people.
Yes.
In a city of 850,000.
Now, what the scary part of it is, the cops get to decide.
Good point.
Because I saw this
Good
happen
point.
in front of my house twice.
What did you see?
In the last month. And
Tell
I
me
took
what you saw.
pictures. Well, I saw one lady with a spit bag over her head, and they looked like they were. I heard a lot of screaming outside my house, and I was just about to go downstairs anyway, and so I took pictures of it. And well, there were several of us taking pictures, and they had this woman with a spit bag over her head, and
she was spitting?
I don't know. I didn't see her spit, but they were putting her in some kind of an ambulance or emergency vehicle. And the other time they had her on the ground and they picked her up and put her on a gurney, and that was it happens a lot right there on Eddy Street. And I can't help but think, what's triggering this? Is it are the police stressing people out?
And complaints, and neighbor complaints.
Because people get stressed out from seeing a lot of police.
Yeah, they do. And here's the thing. These 8 5150 detentions that are done by the police don't have to be valid at all. These could be people that are brought to the hospital and immediately discharged because they don't meet any of the criteria of threat to self, or harm to others. They're not in danger. They're not suicidal. They're not psychiatrically compromised. They just annoyed some neighbor. That's the truth of it. They annoyed some neighbor and triggered a call for service. And yes, they maybe gave talk back to the police or pushed back a little, and the police said, "The hell with this, I'm going to 5150 you." And yeah, that happens. And so they're brought in, and then the number counts. And for people who've been 5150 5 or 6 times, the police might know them and figure, oh, we'll just do it a few more times. We'll haul them in so they can get conserved. And we don't want the police to decide who gets conserved because, again, the validity of the detentions doesn't count. It doesn't matter if they're valid or not. All that matters is that they hit that 8 times in 12 months. Still, for the number of people this will actually affect, it's not going to solve anything. It's not going to help people on the street. It's not going to get people housing. It's not going to get people treatment.
So what is this, a political football then?
Yes.
Okay.
And it lets the mayor and the supervisor say, look, we did something. We tried to do something.
It's a pet project.
Well, that's putting it polite. I wouldn't even give it that. It's certainly is a political football, but it's a false attempt to try to look like you're providing help to people who need help.
And appease the landowners.
Appease, among others, but appease people who are more fluent. who don't want to see the great unwashed and the great unhoused on the street using drugs often just to survive psychiatrically. Because if you're on the street, you're traumatized by the street, not being able to sleep the night behind a locked door. It's very traumatic being unhoused and homeless. And so people sometimes use substances just to survive the street. I'm not justifying it, but you do it as a survival strategy. And suddenly you're addicted, and addiction is real, it does happen. And then you qualify for this thing. It's not going to help anybody. Treatment and housing will help people. And finally, when Prop C moves through the courts, and it will eventually move through the courts, and the money gets released, because the money's being collected now, when the Prop C money gets released to the city, they'll be able to spend upwards of $1 billion on treatment and housing.
Oh,
Remember,
that's
Prop
wonderful.
C is pulling in $300 million a year. Right now, it's being brought in and put in the bank. It's being collected and banked. So finally, when it's resolved and it's released, all that money is released. That's going to be a lot of money released for housing, for brand new housing for the homeless, for treatment services, for stabilization services. That means for people who are in danger of losing their housing and becoming homeless, it could help them. For people who are in permanent supportive housing, it could help them. So, yeah, a lot of good things will come from this Prop C money, which is actually being collected right now.
So that's the
good
the
thing.
silver lining we hear.
That's the silver lining. Plus, if Mental Health San Francisco passes and the companion tax piece passes in next year, March 2020 is not that far away. It will come around. This is what? It's July? I mean, another
8
few months. Yeah, it'll happen. It'll happen. And then, of course, after March, then we have to worry about the next big election of November 2020.
Sure.
God.
I want to thank you, David Elliott Lewis, for being on the Liberal Buzz show, and we'll be back on the August 1st. Thanks. Oh, it's over.